In the first scenario, leave it to the bureaucrats, what we're looking at are the drivers being high government funding but low social cohesion. So we're looking at a future 20 years ahead where the consumer-directed care revolution, CDC revolution, has failed. But in the meantime, what has happened is a lot of voluntary organisations have folded up because the consumer-directed care contains the challenge that instead of assisting organisations through government funding, etc., the consumer will be able to buy and sell like an ordinary consumer, but there's no guarantee that charities can operate in that sort of environment. So we see the winding up of the charities, a lot of people saying, look, it's all too complicated, we can't understand it, and also an element of possibly of scandal, because we know that whenever you have any new government intervention on something, you always end up with a criminal element coming in, so there may be shonky providers, etc. So for one reason or another, the voluntary organisations have largely disappeared, but the government still feels obliged to take care of people in the home. So they've simply said, look, we'll take it all back and we'll go back to the tight governmental level of care, and so we will have bureaucrats back again, large numbers of people in the Department of Community Services and their equivalents, who are therefore responsible for the delivery of care as a government service.
Well, as Keith was saying a moment ago, the really important indicators in this scenario are keeping an eye very closely on the whole experiment, if you like to call it that, of client-directed care or consumer-directed care. And to see whether that is succeeding or whether there are instances emerging that tend to suggest that the experiment is failing. The thing to remember about things like client-directed care and the way it's being run by government is that governments tend to like one-size-fits-all solutions. So what they're doing is actually moving from a one-size-fits-all solutions in the past to another one-size-fits-all solution, and that's client-directed care. Now, it's likely to be the case that will suit very well a certain number of clients who feel both competent and able to negotiate through all the contracts that they would need to negotiate through to achieve those levels of care. But there'll be a whole swag of other people where that will fail them. And therefore you need to be watching for those signs of whether that's happening. And some instances of that would be, for instance, as Keith has also said, scandals in the press, scandals on TV, where you get the current affairs TV programs covering instances where people have exhausted the funds that they had available to them, whether through their own fault or through the fault of some exploitative provider, and they're being left to fend for themselves. Now, those will inevitably be scandals in the press, and if you start to see more of those emerging, that's another clear illustration of the failure of that system and the emergence of that scenario. Another really interesting one is to keep your eye on the number of people volunteering, because when we're in a scenario of leave it to the bureaucrats, the whole meme of that in the community is it's not up to us anymore, we've handed it back to government, it's government's responsibility. So people will feel less inclined to volunteer and they'll probably tend to move into other activities, they'll go and do other things. So again, if you're keeping your eye on the level of volunteering, if you see that declining, it's just another one of those indicators that this might be the scenario that's emerging.